I want to start today by talking directly to you. Picture this scenario, right? It's late at night, the house is completely quiet, you're just staring up at the ceiling, and sleep is, well, it's just nowhere to be
Oh,
found.
yeah. We have all been there.
Right. Or perhaps it's right after a really tense, exhausting conversation with a friend or a partner. You're sitting in your car with that heavy, sinking feeling in your chest.
That tightness.
Exactly. Or maybe, you're just doing something entirely mundane. You're scrolling through social media, you see an acquaintance talking about something their therapist said, and for just a split second, your thumb stops swiping.
Just that tiny pause.
Yeah, a little thought bubbles up to the surface like, maybe I should try that. Maybe I should talk to someone.
But then it's gone.
Yep. Almost as quickly as the thought appears, you brush it away. You just keep scrolling. You roll over and force yourself to close your eyes. You tell yourself it's no big deal. You're just tired. And, you'll figure it out tomorrow.
It is a profoundly common experience. I mean, we have this quiet, fleeting intuition that we immediately try to dismiss or rationalize or just bury under a huge pile of daily distractions.
Which is the core focus of our deep dive today. We are looking at some fascinating excerpts from a piece called The Quiet Signal, Your Invitation to Begin Therapy.
It's such a great read.
It really is. And just to be clear, the mission of this deep dive isn't to diagnose you. We aren't here to forcefully push anyone into a clinical setting or, tell you how to live your life.
Right, definitely not.
What we really want to do is unpack the psychology of that exact hesitation. We want to look at the gap between having the thought and actually making the appointment. Okay, let's unpack this. Why is it that we treat mental health so completely differently from physical health?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
I mean, if your car's check engine light comes on, you don't just put a piece of black tape over it and hope the engine fixes itself.
No, of course not.
And if your knee makes a weird clicking sound every time you walk up the stairs for a month, you investigate it. You call a doctor. But when a persistent thought about needing mental or emotional support keeps showing up, we treat it like a nuisance to be ignored rather than a vital symptom to be investigated.
Yeah, it points to a deep contradiction in how we understand our own biology. We are conditioned both culturally and biologically to view physical pain as an imperative to seek help.
Right, like an alarm going off.
Exactly. It triggers a survival response. But we often view emotional pain as a personal failing, something that we are supposed to just endure silently.
Which is so backwards.
It really is. And the core premise of this source material, and this is something that should be incredibly validating to hear, is that if the thought of starting therapy keeps coming back to you, it is not random. It is a highly intelligent signal.
Wow, an intelligent signal.
Yes. You aren't imagining things. And you don't need to be in the middle of a five-alarm crisis or completely falling apart at the seams to deserve help. That quiet thought is your own internal diagnostic system, recognizing that a need is simply not being met.
A diagnostic system, that's a powerful way to frame it. But acknowledging that the signal exists is one thing. Actually picking up the phone or clicking a link to do something about it is an entirely different mountain to climb.
Oh, absolutely. The gap between knowing and doing.
Right. That brings us to the gap, the waiting period between the signal and the action.
What's fascinating here is the sheer length of that gap. When we look at the research presented in our source, it reveals something really striking about human behavior.
Okay, what is it?
Well, the average person considers going to therapy for months, and quite often, even years, before they finally make that first appointment. They are carrying that quiet signal around for years.
Years. That is staggering to think about. It's like driving with that check engine light on for 3 years, feeling the car sputter and just gripping the steering wheel tighter instead of pulling over.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the instinctive reaction, for most of us, is to label that long delay as procrastination.
Oh, for sure. We just beat ourselves up.
Exactly. We tell ourselves we're putting it off, we're being lazy, or we're just avoiding the inevitable. But the text offers a crucial reframe on this behavior. This long delay isn't actually procrastination, it's processing.
We're processing.
Yeah. When you are contemplating therapy, you are processing a massive shift in your own identity. You are moving from someone who has it all handled to someone who is actively seeking support.
Huh. That makes sense.
The human ego is designed to protect our self-concept. If your self-concept is built on being the strong one, the reliable one, or, the stoic one, admitting you need a therapist feels like a threat to that identity.
So it takes time to adjust to that.
Right. It takes a significant amount of time for the mind to adjust to the vulnerability of that new reality.
Okay, I have to jump in here with a bit of pushback
Go for it.
because processing is a very generous word. It sounds incredibly productive, almost clinical. But let's be honest, is this not a bit like leaving an item in your online shopping cart for 6 months?
Oh, yeah, I see where you're going.
You know what I mean.
Yeah.
You add the shoes to the cart, you look at the total, you feel a spike of anxiety, and you just close the tab. You tell yourself you are processing the purchase. At what point does processing just become a highly sophisticated excuse to avoid doing something that feels scary?
That is a very fair challenge.
Like, how do we know we aren't just trapping ourselves in a loop of waiting for the perfect moment?
Well, the source actually warns against exactly that trap.
Yeah.
The text explicitly cautions against waiting for a perfect moment or waiting until you feel ready enough.
Because that moment doesn't exist.
Exactly, because the truth is that perfectly serene moment of total readiness simply does not exist. In psychology, we understand that readiness is often an illusion created by avoidance.
Wait, hold on. I want to make sure I understand that. Readiness is created by avoidance. How does that work mechanically?
Think about how the brain handles perceived threats. If something makes you anxious, like the idea of opening up to a stranger, your brain categorizes it as a threat.
Okay, tracking with you.
When you decide to wait until you are ready, your brain experiences a temporary drop in anxiety because you avoided the threat. You feel relief.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and your brain interprets that relief as, see, waiting was the right choice. So you don't actually feel ready to do the difficult thing until after you start doing it.
So the readiness is a total myth.
The readiness comes from doing the work, from making the appointment, from showing up. It does not come from waiting for the stars to align or for your anxiety to magically evaporate.
That makes a lot of sense.
When processing turns into a waiting game for ideal conditions, it ceases to be processing and becomes a full-blown avoidance strategy.
Wow. The relief of avoiding it reinforces the habit of avoiding it. And the source notes that this trap doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It's usually fueled by specific, repeating internal narratives.
Yes, the stories we tell
The
ourselves.
stories we tell ourselves while we are staring at the ceiling to justify closing that mental shopping cart tab.
These are the internal justifications that keep us stuck. We convince ourselves that our hesitation is entirely rational.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to look at the first major narrative the text brings up. The idea that my problems just aren't bad enough.
Oh, that's a huge one.
I think about this like an amusement park. It's like we fundamentally believe there is a minimum height requirement to ride the therapy roller coaster.
A minimum height requirement. I love that.
Right. You walk up to the clinic and imagine a sign that says, you must be this traumatized to enter. And if you are just feeling kind of numb or burnt out or a little lost, you look at that imaginary sign and think, I don't meet the requirements. I should just go home and let the people with real problems get help.
The amusement park analogy is painfully accurate. We look around the world, we see people dealing with unimaginable systemic tragedies, profound grief, or severe clinical diagnoses, and our brain uses their suffering to invalidate our own.
Which is so unfair to ourselves.
It is, but the text is absolute on this point. Therapy is not just a triage center for catastrophes. You do not need to be experiencing severe trauma to benefit from a therapeutic space.
So what is it for then?
Therapy is designed for everyday heaviness. It's for feeling stuck in your career, experiencing ongoing tension in your relationship, carrying a low-grade, humming anxiety that just won't fade, or simply losing interest in the things that used to bring you joy.
Just that baseline exhaustion.
Exactly. Functioning under chronic low-grade stress damages the nervous system over time just as much as acute events do. There's no minimum height requirement for suffering. If it is impacting your baseline quality of life, it is valid material for therapy.
Okay, but let's say you do admit it is bad enough. I know for me, my brain immediately pivots to the next defense mechanism. Okay, it's heavy, it's affecting my life, but I am an adult. I should be able to carry this myself. We have this deeply ingrained cultural myth of rugged individualism applied to emotional health.
It's a myth that actually works against our own biology. From an evolutionary standpoint, humans are profoundly social creatures.
Right, we used to live in tribes.
Yes, in early tribal structures, showing emotional vulnerability or an inability to cope might have meant being perceived as weak, which equated to a literal physical danger of being left behind.
Oh, so it's a survival instinct.
We still carry that outdated hardware. We equate emotional vulnerability with physical danger. The text hits this head on. It reminds us that we already handle 100 complex systems on our own every single day.
Jobs, kids, bills.
We manage jobs, households, finances, aging parents, children. The idea that asking for support with your mental health is a sign of an inability to cope is fundamentally flawed.
The source uses a really grounded comparison here, comparing it to physical ailments.
Yes, it's so practical. If you had a persistent hacking cough in your lungs for 3 months, you wouldn't stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself, I should be able to cure this bronchitis with sheer willpower. I am an adult.
Right. You'd go to a doctor.
You would go to a professional who understands respiratory systems. The mind is just another system. You handle enough alone. The heavy lifting of untangling your own psychology does not have to be one of those things.
So we push past the idea that it's not bad enough. We accept that we don't have to handle it entirely alone, but then the reality of the situation sets in.
The logistics.
Well, even before the logistics, you actually have to sit across from another human being and expose all of these messy, unfiltered thought. The fear of judgment kicks in hard. What if the therapist thinks I'm crazy? What if they judge me?
This fear is perhaps the most universally human barrier we have. We are terrified of being seen in our raw state and being found lacking.
It's terrifying.
It is. We map our experiences with friends, family, and coworkers onto the therapist. If you tell a friend a dark secret, you have to worry about how it affects their perception of you.
Right. Or if they'll tell someone else.
Exactly. Or if it will change the dynamic of the friendship. But the source clarifies a crucial clinical reality here, and this is the vital distinction. Licensed therapists undergo years of rigorous training, specifically not to judge you. It is a foundational pillar of their ethical mandate.
But how does that actually work? I mean, they are still human. Humans judge things.
They are human, but the relationship is entirely asymmetrical. A therapeutic relationship is completely devoid of the normal social contracts that govern our everyday lives.
What do you mean by social contracts?
When you sit down with a therapist, you do not have to ask them how their day was. You do not have to manage their emotions. You do not have to protect their feelings.
It's really weird to think about.
It is. Their entire profession is built on creating a neutral, contained space for the unsayable. Because you are freed from the social contract of managing the other person, you are freed from the mechanism of judgment.
Wow.
They are trained to respond to your deepest fears with clinical curiosity, looking for patterns and root causes rather than moral judgments.
That lack of a reciprocal social burden actually sounds incredibly liberating. It's a relationship where you are entirely allowed to be the focal point.
Exactly.
Which ironically brings up the performance anxiety. Let's say you sit down, feeling free to be a mess, and then completely freeze because you don't have an agenda. The text points out that people stall because they think, I don't even know what I'd talk about.
We view therapy through the lens of productivity. We think we need to walk into a clinician's office with a neatly organized PowerPoint presentation of our childhood traumas.
Complete with a bulleted list of current symptoms and actionable goals.
Right.
I know I fall into this trap constantly. If I don't have a structured narrative of what is wrong with me, I feel like I'm wasting the professional's time. Like I need to be the project manager of my own healing.
It's a very common feeling.
How do we give ourselves permission to just show up without a script? Because the source explicitly says that sitting down and saying, I don't know where to start, is a perfectly valid opening line. How is that clinically useful data?
It is useful because the hesitation itself is data. You don't need to be the project manager because you are hiring one. The text reassures the listener that absolutely no plan is needed on your end.
Really? None at all?
None. You are providing the raw material.
Yeah.
The therapist is providing the framework. A skilled clinician knows how to guide the conversation. When you say, I don't know where to start, they might simply ask, well, what was the feeling you had right before you logged on to this call?
Oh, that's such a simple pivot.
Or, what is the most persistent thought you had today? They take that uncertainty and use it as the thread to start pulling. The pressure is completely off you to be the perfect, organized patient.
Okay, so we have broken down the justifications. We understand the mechanisms behind the hesitation, but the source makes a very compelling and somewhat sobering pivot here.
Yes, the cost of waiting.
Right. It suggests that while these mental roadblocks explain why we delay, the real danger is the physiological and psychological cost of what is happening to our minds while we wait.
This addresses the why now question. We have established that mental health doesn't operate on a tidy schedule. But waiting doesn't just mean pausing your life. Waiting has an active compounding cost.
Because it gets heavier.
Because the heaviness does not remain static. It doesn't magically dissipate while it sits in your mental shopping cart.
The text uses the concept of patterns solidifying. How exactly does waiting make the problem worse mechanically?
It comes down to neuroplasticity. Every time you experience a stressor and choose an avoidance behavior like canceling plans because of anxiety or shutting down during an argument, your brain releases a tiny bit of dopamine.
Dopamine for avoiding things.
Yes, it rewards you for escaping the threat. Over months and years of processing or waiting, those neural pathways related to your stress response and your avoidance mechanisms get physically stronger and faster.
Wow.
The anxiety essentially calcifies. It weaves itself into your daily habits until you don't even recognize it as anxiety anymore. You just think it's your personality.
That is terrifying.
The core message of the text is that the earlier you interrupt that reinforcement cycle, the less structural rewiring there is to untangle later. You are saving your future self from a much more complicated excavation project.
So we have this massive psychological mountain, the months of avoiding the check engine light, the evolutionary fears of vulnerability, the neuroplasticity making our anxiety structural.
A lot.
It's a ton. And when your brain is already looking for an excuse to back out, finding out you have to drive 40 minutes across town, find parking, and battle insurance companies is the final nail in the coffin.
Oh, the logistics will absolutely stop people in their tracks.
Which is why the source transitions from these abstract concepts to the highly practical logistics of how modern clinics are trying to solve this exact friction problem.
They're actively designing their onboarding to disarm your avoidance mechanisms.
Precisely. The source actually uses a clinic in Georgia coping and healing counseling, also known as mental space therapy, as a specific case study for how to dismantle this friction. Because the contrast between the mental mountain we build and the physical reality of starting is wild.
It really is night and day.
You don't have to embark on a vision quest. You go to a website, shoopchaintherapy.com, you click a single button that says, request an appointment.
Just one click.
Within a day or two, someone calls you back. They handle the administrative nightmare of verifying your insurance behind the scenes. And notably, the source points out they accept most Georgia Medicaid plans, along with major commercial insurers, which completely removes the financial friction that stops so many people.
That financial barrier is huge.
Massive. And then you simply receive a secure video link. You're telling me the cure for years of built-up solidified anxiety patterns starts with just clicking a button from my car during a lunch break.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly the beauty of the modern telehealth model that coping and healing counseling is utilizing.
Right.
Think about the traditional model of therapy. You have to commute in traffic, sit in a sterile waiting room surrounded by old magazines, potentially run into someone you know,
Ugh, the worst.
and then drive all the way back while trying to process a heavy emotional session. That is a massive amount of physical friction added to the emotional friction.
It is an hour of driving where your brain is begging you to turn the car around and go back to what feels safe.
Exactly. The telehealth model removes the physical environment as an excuse. No waiting rooms, no commute, no judgment. You can literally have a profound, structural, life-altering conversation from the corner of your couch.
Or, as the source points out, from your car on your lunch break.
Or from your bedroom after the kids are finally asleep. It meets you exactly where you are in the environment where your nervous system already feels most secure.
It takes away every single logistical excuse we just talked about, which is both wonderful and slightly terrifying, because then it's just you, the quiet signal, and the decision to click the button.
The barrier to entry has never been lower.
We have journeyed from that 2 a.m. ceiling stare, through the neuroplasticity of avoidance and the evolutionary fear of judgment, all the way to a simple button on a website. The reality is that taking this one small step is vastly smaller and simpler than the massive psychological hurdles we construct in our minds.
It really is.
For our listeners in Georgia who are recognizing that quiet signal in themselves right now, the specific contact details for coping and healing counseling or mental space therapy are completely accessible. You can visit their website at touchdtherapy.com. You can call them directly at 404-832-0102, or you can email them at support@tripdtherapy.com. Again, they handle the friction of insurance, accepting most plans, including Medicaid.
So important.
So what does this all mean? As we bring this deep dive to a close, how should we look at that quiet signal differently moving forward?
I want to return to the final thought presented in the source because it offers the ultimate validation for anyone listening. If you have been thinking about therapy, it is not a random glitch in your brain. It is data.
It's data.
And if you are listening to this deep dive right now, if you have stayed with us for this entire conversation unpacking these mechanisms, it means a part of you already knows exactly what you need. You do not need to have it all figured out. You don't need the PowerPoint presentation.
Thank goodness.
You just have to honor the intelligence of your own signal and take that one surprisingly small step.
It's about trusting your own internal diagnostic system instead of ignoring the check engine light. But I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought to mull over today as you go about your week. We have spent this entire time analyzing the quiet signal prompting you toward therapy and how our brains work so hard to ignore it for months or even years.
Mm.
If the quiet, recurring thought of starting therapy is actually a highly intelligent signal from your subconscious trying to protect you, wait, let me rephrase that without the pause. If the quiet, recurring thought of starting therapy is actually a highly intelligent signal from your subconscious trying to protect you, what other quiet signals is your mind sending you about your life, your boundaries, or your happiness that you're currently putting on hold for months or years?